What if the biggest threat to your financial future isn't a recession, isn't inflation, and isn't a bad investment? What if it's something you're doing every single week without even noticing? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people believe wealth is destroyed by dramatic mistakes. A failed business, a market crash, a reckless purchase. But after 40, that's rarely what happens. For most people, wealth disappears quietly, one invisible decision at a time. The danger is that these habits don't feel expensive. They feel normal, responsible, even. That's what makes them so dangerous. Because while you're busy avoiding obvious financial mistakes, these silent habits may already be draining tens of thousands of dollars from your future. And the worst part, many of them are common among people who earn good money. People who believe they're doing everything right. So before you assume this video isn't about you, pay very close attention. Because one of these 8 habits could be quietly sabotaging your wealth right now, and you probably haven't noticed it yet. Let's begin. If I'm doing so much better than I used to, why doesn't it feel like I'm getting ahead? Why does financial freedom still seem just out of reach? Why does building real wealth feel slower than it should? And why, despite years of effort, does the finish line keep moving farther away? If you've ever had those thoughts, this video is for you. Because the habits we're about to discuss aren't obvious. They're not the financial mistakes people warn you about. In fact, some of them may feel completely reasonable. They may even be part of your daily routine. That's what makes them so difficult to detect. You don't notice the damage today. You notice it years later, when opportunities have passed, when time has become more valuable, and when recovering from financial setbacks becomes much harder than it was at 25. So as we go through these 8 silent habits, don't think about other people. Don't think about friends, co-workers, or family members. Think about yourself, your choices, your routines, your future. Because the habit that is costing you the most money may be the one you've stopped noticing altogether. What makes these habits so dangerous isn't that they're expensive. It's that they often feel harmless, and that's not just an opinion. It's something researchers, investors, and behavioral thinkers have been warning about for decades. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist whose work transformed our understanding of decision-making, discovered something fascinating. Human beings are remarkably poor at recognizing the long-term consequences of small, repeated choices. We tend to focus on what feels important today, while overlooking what quietly compounds in the background. In other words, the decisions that shape our future are often the ones that barely attract our attention. Munger spoke about this repeatedly. He argued that success and failure rarely come from a single dramatic event. Instead, they emerge from a chain of behaviors that compound over years. Small actions, small assumptions, small habits, repeated long enough, they become destiny. And that's especially true after 40. Because by this stage of life, time becomes more valuable than effort. You can recover from a bad month, you can recover from a bad year. But recovering from a decade of invisible financial leakage is far more difficult. That's why this video isn't really about money. It's about awareness. It's about identifying the hidden patterns that quietly separate people who build lasting wealth from those who spend years wondering why progress never seems to arrive. And as you'll soon discover, some of these habits are so common that millions of intelligent, hardworking people repeat them every day, without realizing the price they're paying. But here's an even more unsettling question. What if the habits damaging your wealth aren't the ones you're worried about? What if the real threat is hiding in places you've stopped examining altogether? Think about that for a moment. Most people regularly question their investments, their savings, their income. But how often do they question the behaviors that drive all 3? And what if some of your most trusted financial routines are actually working against you? Not because they're obviously wrong, but because they were designed for a version of your life that no longer exists, a version of you that was younger, had more time, and could afford more mistakes. That's the hidden danger. The financial habits that hurt us most are rarely the ones we notice. They're the ones we've stopped questioning. And before this video ends, you may discover that one of them has been quietly influencing your decisions for years. The first silent habit is surprisingly common. Every time income goes up, spending goes up with it, not dramatically. Just enough to ensure that real wealth never gains momentum. Imagine someone earning $60,000 a year. A few years later, they're earning $90,000, then $120,000. From the outside, it looks like tremendous progress. But with every raise comes a slightly larger house, a slightly newer car, slightly more expensive vacations, slightly higher monthly commitments. 20 years later, their income has doubled. But their financial freedom hasn't. This is known as lifestyle inflation. And it quietly destroys the power of compounding. Because wealth is not built by what you earn. It's built by what remains available to invest. Every dollar automatically absorbed by a higher lifestyle is a dollar that never gets the chance to multiply. The goal isn't to avoid enjoying success. The goal is making sure your assets grow faster than your expenses. And the next habit is even more deceptive because many people believe it's actually saving them money. Paying for convenience without measuring the cost. After 40, time becomes more valuable. But convenience can quietly become expensive. A delivery fee here, a subscription there, an upgrade because it's easier. None of these decisions seem significant until years later, when hundreds of small conveniences have become thousands of dollars annually. The problem isn't convenience itself, it's unconscious convenience. When spending becomes automatic, evaluation disappears. And when evaluation disappears, small leaks multiply. Wealth rarely disappears through one giant hole. It usually escapes through dozens of tiny ones. And the next habit is responsible for far more damage. The sixth silent habit doesn't usually come from greed, it comes from caution, from the desire to protect what you've worked so hard to build. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because after 40, many people become so focused on avoiding losses that they unknowingly prevent growth. They keep large amounts of money sitting idle in checking accounts, low-yield savings accounts, or cash reserves that continue growing far beyond what they actually need. It feels responsible, it feels prudent. But sometimes, the greatest financial risk is not taking a visible risk at all. Consider two people in their mid-40s. Both have spent years working hard. Both have accumulated savings. Both want financial security. The first person keeps a substantial amount of money parked in cash because it provides peace of mind. They can see it, touch it, access it instantly. And every month they feel reassured knowing it's still there. The second person also values security. But they understand that security and growth don't have to be enemies. They maintain an emergency fund. Then put the rest of their money to work. 5 years pass, then 10. The first person never experiences a market decline. But they also never experience meaningful growth. The second person experiences ups and downs, periods of uncertainty, moments of discomfort. But over time, their money begins generating opportunities that cash alone never could. This is one of the most misunderstood financial traps after 40. People often think risk only comes from investing. But risk also comes from standing still. Inflation doesn't care whether your money feels safe. Every year that idle cash fails to grow, its purchasing power quietly shrinks. Not dramatically, not in a way that grabs your attention, but gradually, relentlessly. The danger isn't that you wake up one morning and discover your wealth has disappeared. The danger is realizing 10 years later that your money worked far less hard than you did. And by then, time has become much more valuable. Charlie Munger often emphasized the power of compounding. What many people overlook is that compounding works both ways. Growth compounds, but missed opportunities compound too. True financial security isn't created by hiding from risk. It's created by understanding which risks matter most. Sometimes protecting wealth means preserving it. And sometimes protecting wealth means allowing it to grow. The challenge is knowing the difference, and the next habit is even more deceptive. Because unlike idle cash, it often appears right after people become more successful. In fact, many people mistake it for progress. The fifth silent habit doesn't usually feel like a mistake. In fact, it often feels like success. After all, isn't the purpose of earning more money to enjoy a better life? Of course it is. The problem begins when your lifestyle starts growing faster than your assets. When every financial victory immediately creates a new financial obligation, a bigger home, a more expensive car, a higher standard of living, more monthly commitments. And before long, the income that once felt abundant begins feeling ordinary again. Imagine someone receiving a significant promotion in their early 40s. They've worked for it for years. They've earned it. Naturally, they decide to reward themselves. A nicer neighborhood, a luxury vehicle, premium memberships. More frequent travel. Nothing outrageous, nothing irresponsible. Just a series of upgrades that seem perfectly reasonable. At first, life feels better, more comfortable, more enjoyable, more successful. But a few years later, something unexpected happens. Despite earning more than ever, they don't feel financially free. They feel financially obligated. Their lifestyle now requires their income to keep flowing at the same pace. Every raise has already been spent. Every bonus has already been allocated. Every improvement in income has been matched by an improvement in expenses. And the gap between earnings and true wealth never widens. This is one of the most deceptive financial traps of midlife. Because the danger isn't spending money. The danger is spending future flexibility. Assets create options. Lifestyle creates obligations. An asset can continue serving you long after you've earned the money. A lifestyle upgrade often requires continuous funding. That's why two people with identical incomes can experience completely different levels of financial freedom. One is building assets, the other is building maintenance costs. And over time, the difference becomes enormous. This is what many people fail to see. The goal isn't to look wealthy, the goal is to become wealthy. Those are not always the same thing. A larger lifestyle may impress people today, but a growing asset base can change your future for decades. Real wealth is not measured by how much of your income disappears each month. It's measured by how much independence your assets create. Because eventually, every financial decision leads to one question. Are you buying a better life, or are you buying a more expensive version of the same life? And what most people never realize is that the next habit doesn't cost money directly. It costs something even more valuable, something that, once lost, can never be fully recovered. The fourth silent habit is one of the most common financial illusions in modern life. And it's surprisingly easy to fall for, because on the surface, it looks like success. The paycheck gets bigger. The career advances, the bonuses increase. The income graph keeps moving upward, and yet, real wealth remains almost exactly where it was. That's because income growth and wealth growth are not the same thing. One creates the opportunity to build wealth, the other is the actual result. And many people spend decades improving the first, while barely improving the second. Imagine two friends entering their 40s. Both are intelligent, both are hardworking. Both have successful careers. The first earns a very impressive income. Every few years comes another raise, another promotion, another increase in status. People around him assume he's becoming wealthy. And perhaps he assumes the same thing. The second friend earns less, not dramatically less, but enough that most people would consider him financially behind. Yet year after year, he quietly acquires assets, investments, ownership, income-producing resources. Nothing flashy, nothing that attracts attention. Fast forward 10 years, the first friend has earned far more money. But the second friend owns far more wealth, and suddenly the difference becomes impossible to ignore. This happens because income is often visible, wealth is usually invisible. People celebrate salaries, promotions, job titles. Few people celebrate net worth. Few people discuss assets. Few people measure how much of today's income is actually becoming tomorrow's freedom. That's why one of the most important financial distinctions can be expressed in a single sentence. Income is what comes in. Wealth is what stays. Income can disappear the moment work stops. Wealth can continue working long after you've stopped. Income buys possibilities. Wealth buys options. Income creates cash flow. Wealth creates independence. And after 40, that distinction becomes increasingly important. Because at this stage of life, the goal is no longer simply earning more. The goal is creating a future that depends less on constant earning. The uncomfortable truth is that many high earners never become wealthy. Not because they lacked opportunity, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they mistook a growing income for a growing foundation. A larger paycheck can improve your life, but only assets can buy back your time. And eventually, every financial journey reaches the same question. Are you building a bigger income, or are you building a bigger life? Because one creates comfort today, the other creates freedom tomorrow. And the next habit is where intelligent people often become their own worst financial enemy. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they keep postponing what they already know they should do. The third silent habit is rarely caused by ignorance. In fact, most people already know what they should do. They know they should start investing or invest more consistently. They know they should review their retirement strategy, reduce unnecessary debt, create a financial plan, update an outdated portfolio. The problem isn't a lack of information, the problem is delay. Because some of the most expensive financial mistakes are not mistakes at all. They're decisions that never get made. Imagine someone in their early 40s. They've been meaning to invest for years. Not tomorrow, not next month, for years. Every January they tell themselves this will be the year. Every December they realize nothing changed. The same thing happens with retirement planning. There's always another project at work, another family responsibility, another urgent expense, and so the decision gets pushed into the future. Not because it's unimportant, but because it isn't urgent. The same pattern appears with debt. The balances aren't catastrophic. The payments are manageable, so nothing feels broken. And because nothing feels broken, nothing gets fixed. Year after year, the person remains financially busy, but financially unchanged. One of the greatest misconceptions about wealth building is the belief that action creates consequences, while inaction does not. But reality works differently. Inaction compounds exactly like action. A decision delayed for 1 month may seem insignificant. A decision delayed for 5 years can alter the trajectory of an entire financial future. This is what makes procrastination so dangerous. Its costs are invisible. At least in the beginning, you don't see the returns you missed. You don't see the opportunities that never materialized. You don't see the compounding that never started. All you see is the present moment. And the present moment always makes delay feel harmless. Behavioral psychologists have long observed that human beings naturally prioritize immediate comfort over future benefit. We postpone difficult decisions because postponement feels painless. But painless is not the same as free. Every year of delay carries a cost. The problem is that the bill arrives much later. And by then, time has become a far more precious asset. The cost of a bad decision is visible. You can usually identify it immediately. You know when you've made a mistake. But the cost of no decision is usually hidden. It accumulates quietly, in the background, without attracting attention, until one day, you realize years have passed and the life you intended to build is still waiting for you to begin. The truth is that financial success is rarely determined by what you know. It's often determined by how quickly you act on what you already know. And the next habit feels comfortable, which is precisely why it's dangerous. Because unlike the habits we've discussed so far, it doesn't create stress. It creates ease, and that ease can quietly keep people stuck for decades. The second silent habit is subtle. It doesn't feel reckless. It doesn't feel irresponsible. In fact, it often feels like success. Because after years of hard work, many people eventually reach a place where their finances seem stable. The bills are paid, the income is predictable, the investments are running, life feels under control. And that's exactly when a dangerous mindset can begin to develop. Comfort replaces intention. The financial strategy that was once actively managed slowly shifts onto autopilot. Imagine someone in their late 40s. They've done many things right. They built a career, saved money, accumulated investments, created stability. And because life appears to be moving in the right direction, they stop asking important questions. Is my current strategy still the best strategy? Have my goals changed? Has my risk tolerance changed? Am I still allocating my money according to the future I actually want? Years pass, then more years. The accounts continue existing. The investments continue growing. The routines continue repeating. But nobody ever pauses long enough to ask whether the direction still matches the destination. Eventually, they discover something surprising. They've been managing their finances. But they haven't been managing their financial strategy. One of the greatest advantages wealthy people possess is not necessarily knowledge. It's awareness. They understand that financial plans are not permanent. Because life isn't permanent. The goals you had at 30 may no longer serve you at 50. The risks you could tolerate 10 years ago may be very different today. The opportunities available now may not exist 5 years from now. And yet many people continue using outdated financial assumptions simply because those assumptions once worked. That's the hidden danger of autopilot, not that it creates immediate problems, but that it prevents intentional adjustments. A ship can remain perfectly functional, its engines can be running flawlessly, its systems can be working exactly as designed, and still end up in the wrong place, not because something broke, because nobody corrected the course. Financially, the same thing happens all the time. People continue moving, continue earning, continue saving, continue investing, yet never stop long enough to determine whether their actions remain aligned with their future. Financial comfort is not the same as financial clarity. One feels good, the other creates direction. And after 40, direction becomes increasingly valuable. Because every year carries greater opportunity costs, every decision matters more. Every adjustment becomes more significant. The question isn't whether your finances are working. The question is whether they're working toward the future you actually want. And that's what makes the final habit so important. Because it doesn't merely damage wealth on its own. It quietly amplifies every other habit we've discussed. It can make lifestyle inflation worse, delay more costly, idle cash more dangerous, and financial comfort more deceptive. But the final habit is different, because it can quietly make every other habit on this list worse. And now we've arrived at the final habit. The habit that quietly strengthens every other mistake on this list. The habit that feels logical, reasonable, even intelligent, yet often creates some of the most expensive financial consequences later in life. It's this, continuing to use money habits that worked at 30 without questioning whether they still work after 40, because success can be deceptive. Sometimes the habits that helped you reach one stage of life become the habits that hold you back in the next. Think about your 30s. For many people, that decade is about acceleration. Building a career, taking risks, working longer hours, pursuing opportunities aggressively. The future feels distant. Mistakes feel recoverable. Time seems abundant. If something goes wrong, there's always another decade ahead, so the strategy makes sense. Focus on growth, push harder, take chances, move fast. And for many people, those habits work. But then something changes, not overnight, not dramatically, quietly. Life enters a new phase, responsibilities increase, time becomes more valuable, recovery becomes slower. Priorities begin to shift, yet many people continue operating with the exact same financial mindset they used 10 or 15 years earlier. They never stop to ask an important question: has the game changed? This is where financial maturity becomes essential. Because every stage of life asks different questions. And different questions require different answers. The priorities that mattered at 30 may not be the priorities that matter at 50. The risks that were acceptable at 30 may not be appropriate at 50. The opportunities that once created growth may now create unnecessary exposure. Most importantly, the cost of mistakes changes. When you're younger, a poor financial decision can often be corrected with time. After 40, time becomes a less abundant resource. A 5-year setback no longer feels like a small detour. It becomes a meaningful portion of your remaining wealth-building years. That's why some people continue earning more, yet feel increasingly vulnerable. They're trying to solve today's challenges using yesterday's assumptions. And the longer that continues, the wider the gap becomes between effort and results. The reality is that financial success is not about finding one perfect strategy and repeating it forever. It's about adaptation. It's about recognizing when circumstances have changed, when priorities have changed, when the rules of the game have changed, and having the courage to evolve accordingly. The greatest financial mistake after 40 is assuming that what brought you here is automatically capable of taking you where you want to go next. Because wealth is not built by repeating old answers. It's built by recognizing when life is asking new questions. The people who build lasting wealth are not necessarily the smartest, nor the highest earners, nor the luckiest investors. They are often the people willing to re-examine their assumptions, to challenge old habits, to adapt before circumstances force them to, and to understand that financial wisdom is not knowing all the answers. It's knowing when the answer that once worked no longer does. The deepest lesson hidden inside all 8 of these habits has very little to do with money. Money is simply where the consequences become visible. The real issue is something far more fundamental: attention, because every habit we've discussed today shares the same root cause. Not greed, not ignorance, not bad luck, but unconsciousness. The gradual tendency to stop examining the patterns that shape our lives. Think about it. No one wakes up intending to weaken their financial future. No one decides to slowly undermine their wealth. No one deliberately chooses decades of missed opportunity. What happens instead is much quieter. A decision becomes a habit becomes a routine becomes an identity, and eventually, we stop questioning it. That's the moment the habit gains power. Not when it begins, when it becomes invisible. And perhaps that's the greatest paradox of wealth. The people who lose the most money are not always those making the worst decisions. Often, they're the people who stop noticing they were making decisions at all. Because every financial choice is ultimately a vote for a future version of yourself. The question is whether those votes are intentional or automatic. And after 40, that distinction becomes increasingly important. Because at this stage of life, the game is no longer about accumulating more. It's about aligning more, aligning your money with your values, your habits with your goals, your daily choices with the future you're trying to create. The deepest threat to wealth is not a market crash. It's living on autopilot for so long that your actions quietly drift away from your intentions. And the deepest form of financial wisdom is not learning how to make more money. It's learning how to remain awake to your own patterns. Because when awareness disappears, wealth usually follows. But when awareness returns, everything can begin to change. Before you leave, consider this. Most people spend their entire lives believing that wealth is about money. But eventually, if you look closely enough, you begin to realize that money was never the destination. It was only a tool. A tool for creating choices. A tool for creating freedom. A tool for creating time. And time may be the most misunderstood form of wealth in existence. Because when we're young, we're willing to exchange almost unlimited time for more money. Yet as the years pass, the equation slowly reverses. We begin wishing we had protected more of our time, more of our attention, more of our energy, more of the moments that can never be purchased back. That's why the most successful people are not always those who accumulate the most. They're often the ones who learn what is truly worth accumulating. Wisdom instead of impulse, clarity instead of distraction. Freedom instead of appearance, purpose instead of endless consumption. And perhaps that's the real question hidden beneath this entire video. Not whether you're building wealth, but whether you're building a life that your wealth is meant to serve. Because one day, the numbers won't matter nearly as much as the choices they allowed you to make. The people you spent time with, the experiences you embraced, the peace of mind you created, the freedom you preserved. And when you view wealth through that lens, something remarkable happens. Money stops being a scoreboard and starts becoming a compass. A compass pointing toward the life you truly value. The question is, are your daily habits leading you in that direction? If you found yourself reflecting on even one of these habits, take a moment to let me know by hitting the like button. Not for the algorithm, for yourself, because awareness is often the first step toward change. And if you're interested in the psychology of wealth, the hidden patterns behind financial success, and the lessons most people learn far too late, make sure you subscribe to the Wealth Compass. Because every week, we explore the ideas that quietly shape your future, whether you notice them or not. And before you go, there's one question worth considering. What if some of your biggest financial struggles were never caused by a lack of money, but by a belief that seemed completely true? A belief so common, so widely accepted, that millions of intelligent people spend decades acting on it without ever questioning it. In our next video, the biggest money illusion people believe until their 40s, we'll uncover the financial myth that quietly shapes careers, influences spending, and keeps countless people chasing wealth without ever feeling secure. Once you see it, you may never look at money the same way again. Until then, keep moving forward and keep following your compass. One final thought before you leave. Of all 8 habits we covered today, which one have you been overlooking? Because the answer that came to mind first is probably not the one costing you the most. The most expensive habit is usually the one that's become invisible. And in the next video, you'll discover why an illusion most people trust for decades may be the very thing preventing them from ever feeling financially secure.